Alright, so unfortunately, as I was recording this footage, my headset mic was on the fritz and I didn't realize it, so this is going to be a voiceover. That probably means all of this mouse movement, not going to make a whole lot of sense, but I'll do my best to work my way through the games, seeing them a second time, reporting from the future. The thing that is worth mentioning here is that casual versus ranked is something that new players get confused about a lot. So, as far as we know, casual basically just means you're going to get matched with anyone else in casual queue. There's little to no matchmaking, so you could get matched up against someone who's fairly new at the game, or you could get matched up against someone who owns every card and is playing their ranked deck, but just doesn't feel like playing ranked. So whenever someone asks me, I always recommend they play ranked. The nice thing is ranked rewards are also slightly better, and since there's ranking from bronze all the way to masters, you'll probably start out in bronze with a lot of newer players as well. So we're going to have a little cut here, about 45 seconds in the queue. Sometimes it can take a little time to find your matches, especially on the outer ends of the ranking system. But here we get matched up against what we can guess is a fairly new player in Bronze 3. And looking at the opening hand, we have a Justice Sigil and Influence that misses out on fire here. We have nothing that produces fire, and that Lost Scroll, while it gets us to 3, doesn't help in that regard. So a mulligan and a snap keep here. The Seek Power will get the Fire Sigil, meaning we have access to all 3 factions, which means the display's online, and we can play a Smuggler on 3. So at some point in this match, we may notice that the opponent is playing a pretty substantial deck here. You can tell because it's taller than the one I'm playing. There is an achievement in the game for beating your opponent with a 150 card deck, and some people do like to get that. So the Sabotage shows us a number of things. That Cloak, a little bit concerning, but I don't like my opponent drawing cards off of the Katana, and we get to see most of their hand there. So this Brazen Daredevil, a bit concerning. The ability on it pretty good, although it is random, and if they get to put equipment on it, it can just gun down our units if we get unlucky, / our opponent gets lucky. So here, if they do draw another weapon, it is a bit risky to play the Smuggler, just because they may kill it, but we go ahead and get rid of the Phoenix here and grab a Suffocate, so that hopefully if our opponent has it big by next turn, we can just get it out of the way and start attacking. And if our opponent doesn't have anything to play here, the good news for us is it does have Reckless, which means it has to attack into the 2-3. And it's an easy block. Free attack. We do see our opponent is playing Praxis, which is fire and time. They could be missing a third influence, but it's always hard to tell. The second Hidden Road Smuggler, going to get rid of one of the 2 displays. Having 2 is not a bad thing, but I'm really curious what else the opponent is holding on to and whether or not I can pull something out of their hand. They've missed a power drop, and so if they have something really good on 4 and we can mug it, that seems like the correct thing to do. So we see their entire hand here. Obviously they didn't have power, so we're going to see the whole thing. They have a Barbarian Camp, which is going to pump up their units, and the Healer's Cloak. So I actually go ahead and take the unit that costs 4 here. The reason I do that is so that our opponent can't play it and start putting equipment on it. If they lead with Barbarian Camp, assuming they had hit power here, then they would have a very large unit to put that cloak on. So it seems like an easy pickup, but looks like our opponent missed on power and decides to concede. So rewards in between matches, we get the kind of pre-made reward. It's not a daily. That was just guiding new players into the ranked queue or casual queue, just playing against other players. And we get our first win of the day. So First win of the day pack is always from the most recent set that's been released, and you get it reset if you're in the US sometime in the middle of the night, and we'll check that timer, I think, near the end of the video. So this is what the ranked reward scheme looks like. Each win you will work your way up, so we get a bronze chest here, next win bronze chest, and the third win is a silver. That can happen 2 more times, so you can rack up to 3 silver chests in rank per day, which is a little bit better than casual where it goes bronze, bronze, and then 2 bronzes, and that's what the ranked rewards turn into after you've gotten your 3 silver chests. You can continue to get rewards, you just stop getting the silvers till the next day. Chests can always upgrade. So this mulligan choice, we decide to keep it, mainly on the strength of what I was mousing over there. So we can either torch a unit pretty early, or if our opponent isn't playing units, we can sabotage, and then hopefully we call for power if we haven't drawn power, or call for a second unit if we do draw power, because that Umbran is a decent unit, but if our opponent has removal, we just have nothing on board. So the 1/1 Deadly Scorpion kind of stifles the plan of getting in with our unit. Blocks really well. Since it has Deadly, it's just going to kill anything, because any damage it deals will kill the unit. It's looking like sabotage here. I don't like Torch on a 1/1. Torch is much better defensively against units with, 2 or 3 strength. So we'll probably get hit by the Scorpion a number of times, but it's generally okay. This is also the second opponent we've come across who's playing a 150 card deck, probably looking for that achievement. They're on Elysian, so Time and Primal. And that's why I'm especially keen to sabotage here, because Primal means they probably have a number of spells that they could be playing that I really don't want them to. If they had just stuck with Time, if I'd seen, Time Sigil into Time Sigil, I would be a little less likely to sabotage aggressively, just because it could be their deck is chock full of just decent units, and sabotage will miss. Opponent thinking really hard here. I was worried that they timed out. So we draw the Fire Sigil. It is possible to call here, I think, but I make the mistake of thinking that banner is actually a seat, and so sabotage. So you can see that I can see 4 of the cards my opponent has in hand, and the 5th one is unknown. So that 5th card is either a power or a unit, because sabotage is going to hit attachments and spells. And looking at these, I don't mind the silence a whole lot, especially with that 3/4 in hand. It still gets to be a 3/4 through a silence. So I take the Twilight Hunt, because that can sometimes be a removal spell if your opponent gets a unit bigger than yours out, and with that deadly unit, it's almost always going to be somewhat useful. Here I'm explaining my mistake with the banner, thinking that it was a seat and I would have undepleted power. Don't get punished for it though. Opponent just plays a 1/1, which gets them up to 3 power. The Initiate is nice because it helps you ramp, but not so nice because it doesn't fix any of your influence. Opponent plays the Sigil off of their Seek power, so they still have 1 unknown in hand since they have drawn a card. We didn't know about 1 card they had. They drew 1 and then played 1 card we didn't know they had, so they still have 1 of those. Alright, so we have 2 seats now, so I'm unlikely to make the same mistake a second time. I think about playing a power, but then realize that call into a depleted power could be a possibility, and if I'm not playing anything else, I may as well play depleted power instead of undepleted. So Champion of Glory will be double Justice, double Fire on time, so it can be a 3/3. So I go ahead and take that over the removal. Since I already have Display, I have removal for a big unit. I have Torch, which is removal for kind of a mid to small sized unit, so I don't really need more than that. The second unit was a nice pickup. So the number of cards in the opponent's deck really starting to show here. 0/6 ambush, not really what you're looking for. And here I do torch the Scorpion. It got in a couple hits there and I didn't want to torch it, but since I'm going to be spending my turn next turn to play the Umbran, I really want to have the way cleared to attack with it. My opponent only has 1 strength on board, so... And here, since I've drawn the Lost Scroll, it's a consideration whether I want to play 2 2-cost spells or a 4-cost spell. I opt for the 2 2-costs because I know there's a number of cards in the deck that cost 6 or more that I'm really looking to get to. That also fixes me for 3 Shadow. If I draw Smuggler, I can get Vara out of the market. This also conveniently gets the silence out of my opponent's hand, meaning my 3/4 gets to keep its battle skills, assuming that my opponent doesn't draw another silence. And I think here they pump fake me a bit. Yeah, this would be the easiest block on the planet. A 1/1 that's doing nothing for a 1/1 that gets my opponent up to 4 power is a super easy block. I don't bother attacking in because it's a free block for the 0/6. There's pretty much no spell in the game that would get that 1/1 past a 0/6 in combat. No combat trick that gets you there, so there's no reason to bluff in. And here I'm feeling pretty good. My opponent could still be stuck on influence. They only have 1 primal. They're kind of looking at the cards in their hands, and Viper's Bite is one we haven't seen yet. Unfortunately, my opponent doesn't really seem to understand how deadly works, because a deadly unit has to at least deal damage to kill an opposing unit. However, here, especially since we've drawn a second display, so we can always get some units back if we need to, I take out the 0/6 just so we have profitable attacks. So I guess the opponent's going to learn that a 0 strength deadly unit is not in fact deadly at some other point, and not today. Bit of a curious block there. I think opponent just trying to get units off the board, but losing your 1/1 that does something for a 1/1 that you've already spent a spell on making a 1/1 is never fun. You just 2-for-1 yourself. So opponent accelerates. They have something that they would like to charge, but it's unclear what, because Sabotage did not see any units, since Sabotage cannot see units. Here the Seek Power just thins the deck a little bit, and we keep hitting in with the 3/4. Display, not great here, as I'm mentioning, because all it does is get us back a 1/1. The first mode starts becoming consideration at some point, though. Since it turns our unit into a 4 strength overwhelm, it does push damage a little bit better. But it's worth leaving up right now, just because it's possible our opponent plays a large unit, and at fast speed we can remove that unit and keep pushing damage. The second initiate for our opponent is a pretty bad draw for them. Here they just decide to save 3 damage, which is perfectly reasonable. This puts them to 7. So dead next turn, although they don't know it, because the display will pump both of our units' strength by 1. And if they play something that's displayable, we can just remove that, put them to 1, and then it's very unlikely they draw anything that gets them out of it, but I go ahead and display end up, in case I draw something that I want to cast this following turn, which I do not. So here we get this nice 800 shift stone, which I actually did not know about till that point, and our second chest here. So basically, Direwolf giving you a free rare of your choice there for playing a couple matches. which is nice. Not making a whole lot of progress on these dailies, as I'm mentioning. Killing enemy units, notably, can be done in the what are called PvE game modes, so Gauntlet and Forge, because they do not have the pistols next to them. The Serve Cabre, though, so you have in versus battle, and have the pistols underneath. That says, okay, you have to do that in ranked or casual, something where you're playing against other players. And you'll see down there in the bottom right, since the account is still pretty new and has not gotten all of the 2-faction precons, completing either of those quests will grant that precon. And if there are quests that you don't like, there's this reroll button in the bottom right. You can reroll them into something else that hopefully you'll be more willing to complete. If you get a gold chest quest, those are nice. They're typically a bit more difficult, but you can't have more than one. So if you have a gold quest, you cannot re-roll your silvers into a second gold. Here we time warp again. The matchmaker was a bit hit or miss, trying to find people in bronze to play against. So this hand has 4 power, 1 unit that we can play that the double fire influence requirement on it, on the text of it, can't even meet with this hand. 1 interaction and then a unit all the way at 6. So it's a mulligan, hoping for something better, and we do get it. All 3 factions. Unit to play on 4 that we have the double shadow for. We actually have triple shadow here. Display either to get a unit or return the Umbran if need be, and an early torch in case our opponent plays something we don't like, which they're getting free wisps here. So Fate Mechanic just does something whenever you draw it. That unit is pretty expensive, 4/6. The rate isn't that great, but every time you draw it, you get an extra 1/1 for free. So our opponent casts Second Sight, which not great in a lot of decks. It lets you see a couple cards off the top, but then you're putting another one from your hand back on top just to draw it next turn. However, if you have Fate or Echo cards, you get that value where you can redraw it and trigger the effect again. We got to ramp on turn 2 with that Lost Scroll, which means Umbran's coming down a turn early. Feels pretty good. Our opponent doesn't have any good blocks on it yet for health versus 2 1-strength units from the opponent. So attack first, see what the opponent's got. Doesn't seem like they're playing very many big units right now, although they do unfortunately have a lightning strike. Display doesn't do anything because all it does is boost power. And now I'm looking at the market because we have a choice with the smuggler, so I could seek power first and then put a sigil away, or I can just put the seek power away. I like the rest of the cards. Deathstrike's gonna kind of hit something middling, and so it seems good to just get back the Corrupted Umbran with Dark Return. Makes it 1 bigger, so we've got a 4/5 now. And I do torch the camel here. It's gaining our opponent kind of a small amount of health each turn, but those 4/6s that come with 1/1s are making me a bit suspicious that our opponent's playing an Echo deck. That and the Second Sight. And as soon as our opponent's gaining, 2 health, 3 health, 4 health a turn, that makes the game take a lot longer to close out when our opponent's getting value, drawing basically 2 creatures, 2 units every time. So I torch that, and our opponent ambushes in a 2/3, which cleanly blocks our 2/3. They opt to not trade a 1/1 and a 2/3 for our 2/3, which is probably a mistake, but they do have a second camel here to keep gaining health. So we berserk this. They don't have a good block on it. They only have 4 strength worth of units. So it'll get to attack twice, but then I have Reckless. And I also have Death Strike, so if our opponent tries to do something tricky, or once they have a couple more units on board to, triple block, quad block, whatever they need to do to get this 4-5 out of the way, we can try and blow them out. This Mithril Mace is going to burn a hole in our hand for quite a while. I keep attacking with both units to kind of force my opponent to do something, but what that means is I never have a safe time to play it, because if I play it and attack with it, it'll take some damage off the attack, depending on the unit I attack's strength, and then my opponent can just attack me with my exhausted units and finish it off. So flyers also make it tricky, since there's really no way I'm going to be blocking those. So we attack first, give our opponent as little information as possible to what we're planning on doing this turn. Here yet again, I think the opponent makes the mistake of not double blocking this 2-3. So we're 2 off of Roland's Honor Guard here, which is a really big threat in the air, but unfortunately our opponent has started to draw their Echo units. So they're going to be having a lot of units that they can play at any given time. Now, I'm stuck on 4 power, and it'll actually remain that way for quite a while. And one of the downsides of Echo is every time you draw an Echo unit, or spell, I suppose, your opponent knows that you didn't draw power, and so it's really bad when you're stuck, because every time my opponent, gets to draw 2 cards, I'm thinking to myself, well, they didn't play a power this turn, so they're not able to effectively deploy their hand. Here I attack just with the 4-5, hoping that if my opponent decides to kind of block in a strange way, I can kill some of the relevant units, and then Mithril Mace something else and keep it alive with my 2-3 back to block. But instead they block in a way where Death Strike just is really good. So I kill the unit with tied for the highest strength and with the most health. That way I can save my 4 damage for 2 units, and my opponent doesn't do enough damage back to cause any alarm. Yet again, the opponent draws something with Echo, or possibly a couple of the Fate cards will hide what you draw with them. Opponent deploys another flyer. Had considered attacking, but thinks better of it, so again, I just attack here before doing anything else, see what my opponent does. This Torch is, again, very good. If my opponent decides they want to go all in on blocking, I can do a lot of damage to their units without really exposing mine to a whole lot of risk. And here I pass. The Smuggler is a choice I could have done. I didn't really have anything in my hand I wanted to send back, so I can end of turn Torch something. And if I needed to, I could display something as well, although my opponent has not presented anything large enough that I'm able to. Unfortunately, drawing a depleted power there means I can't play the 6-6 this turn. But my opponent decides they finally had enough of the 2-3, and rather than trying to do anything about it, I decide, my 2-3 that's hidden for a fair number of times, it's good enough to trade for those 2 units, which are really half of a card each. And here there's the curious play. So I put on a weapon and my opponent lightning strikes, which I am an attacking enemy while wielding a weapon, I should say, but I'm curious why my opponent didn't hit the Corrupted Umbran coming in. So they could have hit it for 4 and then just blocked it with a 1-1, and that would have killed it. I guess they know that it has Reckless, and we're hoping to draw power into that 5-4. Because now I have no choice but to attack into that 5-4. Display of Ambition doesn't quite do it, because it has 4 health and not the key 5 or more that I need for that removal mode. Looking in the market, it is a consideration to actually send Cull away with Merchant, just so that if I draw on depleted power, I can play Vara and get back the Umbran, but I decide the 6-6 is good. My opponent, I know, here I'll check in a moment, should have one more 2-1 flyer in hand, because since it has Echo, they're always going to draw sets of 2. and they do in fact have 3 in their void, so I'm expecting another one next turn. I was a bit confused why they didn't play it this turn, however, to save the health, because now that flyer is lethal next turn. I decide to put away this 3/3, looking kind of dumb in the face of a 5/4, get Vara in case I draw undepleted power, and I keep the call. That way I can leave up display in case my opponent decides to do something funny. But all they do is play that 2/1 I knew they had, and here the consideration is, do I just try and do something value-oriented, work my way through this Vara returning units thing, which I can do here due to the undepleted power I drew, or do I try and get lethal on my opponent? The display does give my units overwhelm, as well as the +1 strength, so that is enough through the flying blockers 1 health to finish my opponent off, but they have shown me lightning strike, so considering Vara here, and then I just decide to go for the risky play. This is riskier than, playing a 6/6 that comes with a 4/5 lifestealer, but I decide if my opponent just has lightning strikes, they're going to need 2 to kill this 6/6, and in fact they just have 1. Since it costs 2, they would need a 1-cost spell to finish it off, and the block doesn't do quite enough, because even though the unit dies, the overwhelm damage goes through. And there's the silver chest for the 3rd win for the day in ranked, and now it'll reset back to bronze for the next 3. So here I take a break. Looking at the campaigns, if you go over, there's the end and the beginning, which is kind of a nice interlude here. Rather than playing 5 games in a row, just take a break and play this campaign content. It's relatively scripted, and so I believe I skip it here. Yeah, so there's me finishing it off. But the good news is, once you've finished off, you see that achievement pop up briefly. And I'm going to skip past that. So here we're going to take a look at those achievements. So the way you do that is go to your profile page. And then once you're there, over on the bottom right, there's this achievements button. And there's everything I've done on this account. So learn the real story is what I just did in that little campaign mode. And it got me 800 gold and also 100 achievement points, which to my knowledge don't really do anything right now. But the gold is good for almost a pack, or you can save up a bit for draft there. So you got your 5 placement games for ranked. We're 3 in, so I decide may as well finish those out. And our opponent from earlier is back, so back at the 150 card deck. This hand has 2 units on 4 and Sabotage on 1, so I like it. The Seek Power gets us Fire Influence, so we have all 3 influence. It is slow. The Lifesteal makes it a bit easier if our opponent is kind of deep on aggro to block them. However, I had forgotten specifically what our opponent's name from earlier was, so I did not know that this was exactly the same opponent. Otherwise, I would know that they weren't really on aggro. Still like the Sabo here. So, like Predator's Instinct, really the removal spell there. The Dirt could make one of their units a bit bigger, which isn't a huge concern a lot of the time, so I leave that alone. Alright, a 1/1 flyer for 2. Again, kind of showing the one of the weaknesses of a 150 card deck is you're maybe going to be playing some stuff that you wouldn't normally play, just in order to fill it out. You're also going to have more trouble fixing. You can only have 4 of any particular card that gets you either 2 influence or kind of influences of your choice, that sort of thing. Opponent thinks pretty hard. Play weapon. and attacks. So that tells me that they're probably not playing any power this turn because they sat there thinking for so long. And unfortunately what that means for them is there's a unit bigger than theirs coming down, followed by a weapon that just straight up kills their unit and starts hitting them in the face. So they really need to hit power here. They think for long enough that, yeah, I'm pretty sure they have power, which is good because it's always nice to have a game. And they have another unit that they decide they want to give charge. Two, 3 hitting is pretty good. When it was a 1-1, I think it got in for 1, so it's done 5 so far. We don't have anything that can block it, but those 3-4 life stealers are going to make up the difference pretty well. Three, not much of a consideration here. It does have Warcry, which is nice. It means it's going to pump something up that we draw later to make it big, but I don't know if my opponent's going to draw any more equipment to put on their flyer, and since I'm not going to be able to block it till 6, and at that point the Phoenix may not even be big enough to block it well, it's good to get the Umbrans out and start equalizing these health totals. So 6 to the opponent puts me back up near the starting total, and them down to 18. Take out their 1 unit, and if they don't draw power or play something here, it's going to be pretty bleak. And that is the case. So hit them again. Play out a power. Play out something that if they decide they need to remove it is going to come back for later. The Umbran may have been technically correct here, and the reason is it does attack for 1 more on the first turn. So if my opponent plays nothing again, I do have lethal here, but I did miss that line. Instead, just playing the larger unit and being more power efficient, spending the power I had. I'm looking at the faction they're playing. Time and Primal don't have anything really good against a board full of units like this, plus a relic weapon that I'm wielding. It's unlikely that they'll be able to deal with both. So I just decided to play another unit out. Doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of risk when they're at 1. Of them kind of dealing with everything that's already on board. Opponent thinks hard. They finally hit their 4th power. Show me a 3-3, and that's going to be the game. Alright, so you see how the ranked rewards have gone back to bronze, so 2 more wins will be the 2nd silver chest, and after 3 those silvers get replaced by double bronze until the daily pack reset when that rolls over. Yet another opponent with a 150 card deck. Looking to get that achievement. I'm actually, off the top of my head, I do not know what the reward for that is, but some people seem keen on getting it, and it's not something I envy. I would not like playing a 150 card deck. Actually, on a new account, I don't know how easily I could afford to play a 150 card deck. It is worth noting that this opponent has the card back from this month's league, which means that they were able to either pay the gold or gems to buy into that. So it's likely that they have a larger collection. The 1/1 Deadly, I was pretty excited about Lost Scroll into Umbran on turn 3. The 1/1 Deadly makes that a lot less enticing. And then here, it's always bad to draw your sewer sludge off the top because if you've already played some units, it's not going to be getting any bigger. I'm not liking the slay a whole lot here. It always feels super bad to slay a 1/1 deadly for 1. You're spending 3 power and a premier removal spell on some little guy who blocks really well, but it may be something that has to be done just to get the 3/4 in for damage. So my opponent chose their second influence as primal, and I'm convinced they're sacking the sludge here, but they do not. I don't know why they wouldn't. A 5/5 seems better than a 3/3 and a 1/2 in my book, but maybe they were worried that I would have removal, which I did, and that slay would have been great, but instead they play the correct line, which is not the line I would have chosen, and I just drop a unit instead of spending removal on a 3/3 or that 1/1. Kind of a weird set of things going on. My opponent playing a unit that has synergy with playing larger units after it. They're playing a deadly blocker that's pretty small, and they're just playing a relic that gains them 1 health each turn if they spend 1. So certainly a pile of cards, but they do show a 3rd influence off that bauble, which is time. So 3 influence deck, and I know I have access to the market, so I make this attack here and opt not to berserk, because I know I'm going to dark return this, so they make the smart block. But Merchant dropping one of these slays, because I don't think I'm going to need both, into a dark return, and then dark returning back the Umbran. 4/5 lifesteal, very good. And if I had decided to berserk it when I attacked on that turn, it would still have Reckless when it came back from the Void, and so I'd be stuck attacking with it, and I didn't really want that if my opponent decided to play some more big units or deadly units. So drawing the 3/3 there, not really a consideration this turn, and not attacking in with the 2/3 into a 3/3. 1 power short of the 6/6 flyer, which looks like it can close the game out pretty well, but opponent slowly gaining health off that relic, and it looks like they may have something else to play here. They're taking a good look at their hand. Possible they're stuck on influence, 1 time, 1 primal, and the unfortunate suffocate. So that suffocate would have been great against the corrupted Umbran before it got bigger. And then here, again, seems pretty good. 2/3 deadly is going to trade for that 4/5, but unfortunately we have the slay. So depleted power really seals the deal here. Still can't play that 7 cost unit, but getting to double spell here, play removal, and cast the 3/3 for 3 is not a bad turn at all. So no good block for our opponent. They have to opt to not block a second time here, which takes them a second. And then we play a 3/3 of our own. So this Devouring Shadow, pretty good for the opponent. I'm not sure it was correct to Devouring Shadow the 3/3 when they can trade for it, but that's what they opted to do. It may have been better to cast it on the 4/5, and then you have a 0/2 that turns into a 2/2, and pretty good blocks after that. But this turn seems very straightforward. Opponent just blocks with the 0/2 and gets their 2/2 flyer and saves themselves the 4 damage. Takes them a minute to decide that that's the correct line. They get a 2/2 flyer, and we get a significantly better flyer. So here our opponent plays Pilfer, and no idea what they draw, and then they immediately play it, which is really unfortunate. Sabo takes the last card in our hand, and I was looking at that display to possibly trade for both of their units. Attacking in with that 4/5 would mean that if they double block, if I display, it kills both of their blockers, and then I have a 6/7 overwhelming flyer, which pretty good. Instead, that Sabo takes that out, and I just Falcon Force her. The 3/3, no real reason to silence that, but this pretty much locks in my opponent's blocks. The double block on the 4/5 is very easy. Especially with no cards in my hand, I'm not going to have anything that stops that from going through. Unfortunately, 9 in the air for my opponent means in 2 turns they're going to be done unless they draw something, and that's one of their 2 turns whiffing, drawing power. They did remember to activate the bauble though, so over 2 turns that would increase the clock, requiring me to either draw something that turn or hit them in the air for an extra turn. So I get the nice achievement there and some extra gold for winning 5 in a row, and then also some shift stone for leveling up Shadow, since I was playing a deck with Shadow. Get placed into bronze 2 after the placement matches. Get another bronze chest. It would be good to play another game, hopefully get that 6th win for another silver chest, but I opt not to. And get some nice packs here. I didn't actually know about these, so reaching level 4 in any faction is going to get you a pack of the first set, so that's pretty nice. Alright, so you can always check your dailies up there. I made some progress, and when I complete one, I get that theme deck. The first win countdown is there too, so in about 5 hours, that rolls over and you can get another pack for your first PvP win. And I decided to open up the packs we've got sitting there, so I don't really like Rejection, but that Steward in the pack's pretty good. Smuggler's Stash is the big boy version of the display that the FJS deck has in it. And Wisdom is also a good pickup, so that I don't have to craft it once I decide to play a deck with it. Accelerated Evolution is a market card in the Alessi deck. And then I pull a Legendary, which is pretty nice, and I'm sure Kalos would be proud here because it's the last word. A really, really interesting relic weapon that's unfortunately very fragile. So the Deadly Quick Draw means it can attack and kill pretty much any unit, but since it only has 1 armor, a Light Breeze will knock it off before you can pay the ultimate and do anything good with it. Still a fun card. So I go ahead and here take a look at the full build from the last episode of building, where we still need that set of Whirling Duos, finish out the Corrupted Umbrans, and get that last Smuggler. Have 3,355 Shiftstone right now, and the whole deck costs 1450, or at least what I'm missing from it, so that's a consideration for the video next time if I decide to do more regular constructed ranked, but that's it for this one.